Good evening. This is Josh Wander from Jerusalem reporting on breaking news as we speak. The Capitol, the U.S. Capitol, is being stormed possibly for the first time in history. We have our editors, David Sidman and Elio Berkowitz, reporting on site over here from Israel, reporting live. And we're also going to show you a stream of what's going on in front of the Capitol as we speak. David,
so
what do you
you're
think about
seeing
this?
here is absolutely unprecedented. You have never seen anything like this. This is nothing short of a people's revolution in Washington, D.C. Frustrated Trump supporters who are understandably upset about the voter fraud that's taken place. They feel like their democracy and the democratic process has been robbed from them. And so they're taking matters into their own hands. And they've essentially, from what I understand, stormed the Capitol building where the Congress
You see the
sits.
gas?
Congress is in lockdown. Correct?
That's a lot of gas.
Both Congress and
Oh,
Senate
they
are
are.
both in lockdown right now. They've whisked the vice president away from the area, and there's even reports of shots fired in different places. It's not clear. Everything is still a little bit foggy, but we do have a picture of someone that has one of the protesters who has breached the chambers of Congress, and you can see her here. Right in the middle of the chambers, and so you know that they have gotten all the way into the inner chambers of Congress.
She looks like she's relaxing.
You know, David, we've been having this conversation for several weeks now since the election, and I've been waffling back and forth about whether or not there was voter fraud. I'm sorry, if you have 2 million people show up at the U.S. Capitol, leave their homes, get this riled up, I don't think you can convince me that there was not voter fraud. These people obviously
shooting people with fire extinguishers that we just saw.
Yeah,
what is that about?
It seems to me that these people really feel there are a lot of people there who really feel that their votes were not acknowledged.
I'd like to comment on that. This doesn't mean that there was or there wasn't voter fraud. What this does mean is that half of America believes that there was voter fraud. It's like when people suggest to me when I speak to an atheist and they tell me, you know what, who says that Mount Sinai actually happened and God gave his commandments to the Jewish people? And I say, you know what, the truth is it doesn't matter if you believe it or not, whether this historically happened or not. The fact is that if you have millions of Jews at the time and hundreds of millions of people since, billions of people since that have accepted this as being truth, so that alone makes it worth something to deal with. And likewise, if half of the American people believe that the elections were illegitimate, then that's something that whether it happened or not, it doesn't matter. That's what I think Ted Cruz, I don't know if you heard Senator Cruz speaking first about from the contestant of the state of Arizona, he said very clearly, it doesn't matter which side you're on. There are half of the people right now that are frustrated and they don't believe that this is fair. And the least that both sides can do is bipartisanly getting together and putting a commission together in the next 10 days to reevaluate and recertify the election.
Absolutely. The figures that I've heard, the data I've heard is 67% of Republicans, and this is going back last week, the week before, 67% felt that the elections were fraudulent. 16% of Democrats believe that that is even more astounding to me.
Independents, Democrats, across the board.
Independents was up over 30% that did not trust the results of the election. And my question is, well, what even if we get through tonight, which I don't know how it's going to happen, they're certainly not going to be able to continue the counting of the votes of the Electoral College. But even if we get through tonight, what's going to happen next week? Biden is going to go into the White House. And what about when 2 million people show up at the White House and start banging on the gates there? This is from this position going forward without acknowledging what goes down. It's impossible to establish a government and to run a government in America without relating to this. It's just
Elio, we're getting multiple comments, and I've heard this before. The rumored that these are not Trump supporters, that there's an Antifa infiltration, that these are people that are dressed up, and they're liberals that are dressed up as conservatives to instigate unrest. We're getting multiple people reporting this. Again, that we have nothing confirmed, but there are many people that are saying that now it doesn't look like that to me from the pictures that I'm seeing. But who knows? Anything could happen in unprecedented times like these.
You just don't know. You just don't know. There's so much deception nowadays. You really don't know who's who, and it's very possible that the people outside are the Trump supporters, and the Antifa are the people who are breaking in, trying to frame the Trump supporters as these kind of unruly mob who can't be controlled. Because, I mean, if you look at the lead up to this, traditionally it was the Antifa protesters who were much more violent and weren't afraid to go there. And now we're seeing usually it's strange that suddenly that would flip, and suddenly the Trump supporters would start blatantly breaking the law, like, barging into, storming the Capitol building. I mean, you just don't see that type of lawlessness with Trump supporters. Now, it's very possible that they are Trump supporters, but it's just as plausible that these are Antifa imposters trying to make Trump supporters look bad. Either way, this is bringing an unprecedented amount of instability to the U.S. government. It's not something that they're just going to be able to recover from tomorrow. This is the type of thing that is sending shockwaves throughout the nation.
I would say, David, throughout the world is looking at the United States now. They've always looked at the world has always looked.
I remember
the world has always looked. Yes, the world has always looked at the United States as being the most stable government in the world. And when imagine that somebody in China or Russia or any other country in the world now is turning on the news and seeing the Capitol building, like, this is not a third world country that's being overrun now and a coup's happening. This is the United States of America that's having their own Capitol building overrun. And this is something which I think, like you said, I think is going to have enormous ramifications.
Brandy Hawthorne wrote that civil war is coming. If you look at this picture, this is what civil war. This civil war looks like. When we're talking about who it is and whatnot, I remember when I was writing after the debates, I started writing about Proud Boys, and I started looking right wing, left wing. What are they? It really sometimes those titles, those classifications are not relevant. And then when I saw the head of the Proud Boys being interviewed by Tim Pool at length, it's not so clear what they are. There's some groups that I mean, Antifa, what are they? They're certainly not anti-fascism. They are fascism. So you really don't know. There are a lot of people out there who start these things who are just simply anarchists. When I see the young people dressed strangely, they're not your classic Trump supporters who are, middle America, homeowners, hardworking people. They're definitely somewhere else. I think with the coronavirus, after being shut down for a year, people are getting a little excitable. I don't think it's proper or accurate to classify right wing, left wing. They might not even be Trump supporters. They might just be people, like the saying goes, they just want to watch the world burn. These could be just a lot of anarchists who were in the crowd and then took it two steps.
Elio, we have a statement that was sent to us by Earl Cox. Earl Cox is a friend of Israel 365. He's an international broadcaster and journalist who has served in senior level positions with 4 U.S. presidents. And due to his outspoken support for Israel, he has been recognized by Prime Minister Netanyahu as a goodwill ambassador from Israel to the Jewish and Christian communities around the world, and named the voice of Israel to America by former Prime Minister Ehud Barak. We have a statement recorded from him. I'm going to play that now.
There's just no rationale in what has taken place in Georgia. I personally am not able to comprehend what has happened, Rabbi. I'm at loss for words. It's a sad day for America. The Democrats, now in complete control, are destined to destroy the American way of life. Expect higher taxes, late-term legalized abortion, and a socialistic government. The Democrat Senate sweep in Georgia will give Democrats control of the Senate and House for the first time since 2004 and boost Biden's ability to carry out his early legislative agenda. Over $500 million were spent since November by the four candidates, a certain sign of how important this Georgia election was for both campaigns, Democrat and Republican. America's future relationship with Israel will undoubtedly suffer with a president and Congress sympathetic to the Palestinians. The annexation of Judea and Samaria will not be supported, in my opinion, by the Biden administration or Congress. Additional pressure will be placed on Israel to make room in Jerusalem for a Palestinian capital. This is only the beginning of a socialist attitude, not only to America, but toward Israel as well.
So you heard it. That was Earl Cox, and that was a strong statement of apprehension, I would say, towards what is coming next.
So it is very strong. What's interesting is that a guy like Earl Cox gives you a real insight into the pain that America is feeling. I mean, these protests aren't coming from a place of grandstanding. They're coming from a place of actual fear, of actual survival. As you could hear in Earl Cox's words, you could hear that he's scared. Now, the only thing I kind of disagree with him, which I don't really disagree, I just kind of, I don't think it's fear that will come into fruition. He's talking about, the impact of the Democratic-led government on Israel. And I think he's getting a little ahead of himself. I'm not sure, as we watch what's going on, I'm not sure that any government, Democrat or Republican, will be able to function, let alone dictate or even suggest foreign policy to a country like Israel. I believe that this is, as far as Israel is concerned, if we're learning anything from this historic event tonight, it's that Israel is on its own more than ever. Because even if the Democrats want to, implement or enforce their ideology in the Middle East, with this that's going on that we're watching right now, it's going to be very hard for them to do anything, let alone deal with foreign policy.
Even without the violence, when 2 million protesters, a protest like this is a different ballgame. But I do agree with you, David. Israel learned a long time ago to we are a nation by ourselves. We cope with ourselves. I'm not so worried. If Biden puts the Iran deal back in place, he'll only hurt America. The Abraham Accords.
No, you should be worried. If he puts the Iran deal back in place, you should be worried.
You think so? Why do you say that?
Because Israel's closer than America.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's not Israel alone against Iran. It'll be Israel with the UAE, with Bahrain, and it'll be Biden sitting in a corner by himself, licking the boots of the Ayatollah and licking the boots of China.
Marilyn from Facebook has a very strong statement. Everyone is focused on what is happening, but not on the reasons of why. Our nation has had its walls breached because it has turned from God, and I believe judgment is about to fall, for her sins are great. Any comments about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that she uses the analogy of walls being breached, because if you remember last month, they had a march called the Jericho March. And what happened with Jericho? The ancient Israelites crossed into the Jordan River, and with the blow of a shofar, and God's help, obviously, they managed to breach the walls of Jericho and take them down. So I don't know, it seems very ominous that just last month there was a Jericho march in the U.S. Capitol, and now they're actually breaching the walls of this city that, they're doing the unthinkable at this point.
I think, if I may, I pray that judgment will not be harsh, but I think the assessment of saying that this is a God issue is so clearly true. Those are where the lines are being drawn. The lines are drawn on spiritual terms, not even religious terms. It's not Christian against Jew or even Muslim against. It's really Mila Shemalai. Whoever is for God is screaming right now. It's a spiritual thing, And I just hope the judgment, and I don't know if it's, I don't want to point fingers and say this person sinned or this country sinned, but I mean, when I look at one of the I think flashpoints for this was when Raphael Warnock won allegedly. He is a horrible person. As a Christian pastor, he's declared himself to be pro-abortion. He's said that Jesus was a Palestinian prophet, and he's supportive of the Nation of Islam, which is led by Louis Farrakhan, who has said the most racist things you can possibly say about Jews. And this is a person who's now going to run the country or be part of that. There is definitely who is for God come to me, and who is not for God is on the other side. I think that's clearly what's happening.
If you don't mind, I'd like to kind of pivot the conversation to Mike Pence. So Pence, from what I understood, could have prevented Biden's essentially stealing the presidency in favor of Trump, and he didn't do that. And
what are you talking about, David? What are you talking about?
Huh?
What are you talking about? Nothing. He hasn't done anything yet. He made a brief statement.
He said he was unable to block the Biden presidency.
To overturn the election. That is clear from the U.S. Constitution that he does not have that authority. He was not saying anything new, and that's actually what the president has said as well. What he is able to do, which would be unprecedented, well, not unprecedented, it happened in 1877, but it's only happened once before in history. And that is, as Senator Cruz pointed out, he could decide that the current, look at this picture, unbelievable. He could say that the current slate of electors needs to be reevaluated, send it back to the states that have certified those electors that are in question, and ask them to recertify. It's something that he didn't mention in his letter. It's something that usually each state that contests it takes they get 2 hours to discuss it. That would already bring it into the middle of the night. In addition to now you have a break because of what's going on. So this adjournment is going to even push it even further. There's a 6 o'clock, by the way, curfew that the mayor of Washington has put on the city. So assumingly that people are going to be riled up by then, who knows what's going to happen after 6 o'clock. But for now, all we know is that it's still being discussed in both chambers. And when they finish all the discussions, then it will go to Mike Pence to decide what to do. He has not made that decision. And like I said, he just made that brief written statement, which was still opened up left a lot of things open as far as what he could do.
So I'm just going on Trump's tweet where he says Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. So it sounds like there's a lot of frustration from Trump towards his vice president. And, I don't know if he's indicating that Pence is going to back down, because apparently, as you said, it's, nothing's
We don't
final.
know what Pence is going to do. And all we know is we do know that it is against the U.S. Constitution for him to overturn, and it's a very dangerous precedent. Imagine that the vice president would just decide that he's not going to accept electors. He's gonna overturn the election. Then the next vice president, when it's a Democrat vice president, they could do the same thing. Every vice president can say, we don't like what happened in the election. Our guy didn't win. We're going to overturn it. That's ridiculous. That's clearly not what's constitutional. What is in question here is whether the vice president, being the head of the chamber of the Senate, is able to send back to the states the slates of electors and say that we want you to recertify. That is not clear. He doesn't mention it at all in his letter, and it's still something that's open if he decides to go that route.
So do you think that Trump was being unreasonable in his tweet in asking Pence to essentially do what he should have done, and that Pence was not displaying courage?
Yes, I think so.
I'm not sure that the president. I'm not sure if he doesn't understand what the U.S. Constitution. This sounds a little bit silly to say this, but the president is not a constitutional scholar. I'm sure he's discussed it with people, but not everybody understands exactly the every detail in the Constitution and what it means and all the precedent that's been set by the courts about the Constitution. It could be that he didn't understand exactly what was in the powers of the vice president, and even if he understood it, maybe he was just, like I said, trying to hint to the vice president that he has other options. And we won't, like I said, we won't know this until at least late into the night.
Well, no, it's hard to understand why a president would suddenly throw his vice president under the bus in a tweet.
I don't think he did that.
You don't feel like he did that? He basically said he's a coward.
If I can relate to what Betty Rue just posted, she says it's about fraud. I think that's really an interesting point. What we are talking about is not procedure, and it's not even opposition to Joe Biden. And I mean, we sucked it up for 8 years of Obama, which was bad and really horrified middle America. However, what we're really talking about here is a basic distrust of the system, which, in my personal opinion, is to a large part justified. When I saw, it's time for Messiah. When I first saw the Democrats calling for massive mail-in ballots, I was like, who decided? What's the process for that? And the fraud is largely because of the mail-in ballots, that they called for massive mail-in ballots, that the laws were changed in unconstitutional manners to facilitate massive mail-in voting in ways that were clearly open to fraud, if not fraudulent.
But the Constitution clearly does not give those powers to the federal government to decide. That the power is completely within the state legislatures to decide these things. If there's a question, it goes to the state judiciary. They're the ones that decide whether there's a question. The federal government, the Congress and the Senate, and even the Supreme Court, and that's what the Supreme Court said when the law, when the case came to them. They said it's not up to us; it's up to the state legislature to decide this. It's not a federal government issue.
Okay, that's true. However, there are 2 points I'd like to make. One is that even though it's up to the states, there are legal procedures that must be followed in order to accommodate new voting procedures.
And so what's clear is that the state legislators completely failed in their responsibility to stand up. And somebody mentioned it that they wanted to push it off to the president, to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court should tell them what to do. Then they wanted to push it off to Congress, that they should tell them what to do. They basically kept pushing off their responsibility. So we see, but the real responsibility is in the hands of the state legislators. It's not in the U.S. Congress or Senate.
Absolutely. But I disagree with you in that I feel that the Supreme Court kind of passed the buck.
Of course they did. There's a good reason for that.
Is that everyone deflected responsibility?
I would contest.
We've got some breaking news here. Fox News has learned that a shooting victim was transported from the U.S. Capitol about 30 minutes ago.
Wow.
They ruled. Wow. They ruled that the other states did not have standing, meaning Texas did not have standing in the elections of other states. And I think that in the case of a presidential election, I personally feel that's inaccurate. Clearly, we see here that these people felt as if they were damaged. That means that they were part of the suit. They should have been considered as having standing in the suit. And for that reason, I think the Supreme Court should have ruled or addressed it. But to just say we're not going to rule on it was wrong. And it also opened up the outlet for so many people to claim, oh, you see, the Supreme Court ruled that there was no fraud, which is an inaccurate statement.
That's not what they did.
That's not what they did. But that's the motto that's being picked up. A lot of people are saying, how dare you protest? There was no fraud in the elections. And that is so not true. There was widespread fraud, and the senators that were going to protest, how many were there? 10. That was their point. Their point is, okay, Biden will get into the office. What can we do? But we have to relate to the fact that the elections are fraudulent. And what we're seeing here in front of us is the graphic manifestation of what happens when people feel like their votes are not being properly counted and properly accounted for. And that's what we're seeing. So
and very possibly this might be just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, this may be the moment, like I've been saying, the watershed moment, which is going to lead. I half jokingly said that this might be the watershed moment that's similar to July 4th, 1776, during the U.S. Revolution, that changes U.S. history forevermore. And who knows? We're definitely looking at history. Someone mentioned us on an earlier show that this is just a small protest which will go away, and in 6 months nobody's going to remember it. Just like Wall Street occupied Wall Street. Clearly, I said that's not the case. I believe that this is something much greater than that, and we're just seeing the snowball start to roll as we speak.
I think this is going to continue on. If here in Washington D.C., I think it's also going to spread to on the state level. People are absolutely not happy about Warnock getting elected. He's a horrifying man. A lot of these state elections, right? Okay, yes, no, this is not the manifestation of no justice for a long time. Exactly. And justice is something that we are required to do in the world. It's one of the Noahide laws. And if there's no justice, there's no order. There's no civilization. We're godless people.
So just to cut into the shooting, there was apparently a woman stormed the Capitol building and was shot by, I guess, the police. Now, just to put into context, to draw a gun in a place like the Capitol building is only under very extreme circumstances. It's worse than an embassy, even, meaning it's really the last resort. It's only if you really feel like your life is in danger. So what we see out here, compared to what the Capitol Police or the Secret Service or whoever is inside the Capitol is seeing, is very different. It seems like it's much more intense than what we're probably seeing from the footage.
Well, we saw that picture of the three officers holding, with their guns out towards the window.
Right. They looked like Secret Service. They didn't look like Capitol Police to me. And for a Secret Serviceman to draw their weapon, that's a life or death scenario. There's nothing short of that. So this is not just a protest. It's not just people walking into the Capitol. This is the saplings of an all-out civil war.
And well, we see that the fact that they brought they whisked the vice president out right away to another location, and they took all of both chambers in lockdown. They brought everybody down into the tunnels underneath to protect them. Clearly, there was an imminent danger to their lives. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done that. So whatever's happening in and around the Capitol as we speak is a very serious situation.
And also, there's reports coming in that hard drives were taken by regular citizens from the Capitol. I mean, this is a Hollywood movie that couldn't have been produced with a $10 million budget. It's so surreal to even look at these images and see how the U.S. government is just being taken over like in a Superman movie. Whether it's Trump supporters who are the ones who are actually storming the Capitol Hill or not, it's showing the world a gaping weakness in the U.S. government that I don't know when they'll be able to recover from, if at all.
Even I'm looking at the Georgia Senate runoffs. The claiming that Ossoff beat Perdue, it's not very credible. I'm not saying there was fraud. I'm just saying it goes against all logic. Perdue already beat Ossoff by a substantial margin, and this was a runoff. And to say that now Ossoff took it away is kind of difficult to believe. Warnock also, he was not a front runner I don't understand these results. And the Senate is at least as important as the White House in these elections. So I think that the incredulity and the disbelief and the lack of faith in the actual electoral process, this is a breach that if it's not related to, it's not gonna just go away.
Marilyn Poe from Facebook has a very poignant comment over here. She says that when and only a few days ago, a member of Congress would get up and pray to a pagan god, we wrote about this, in the very halls that the hand of God had been involved since its infancy. It is in this that I feel the breach may have been sealed.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's very possible. I mean, you have this guy, what was his name? Clements? His name escapes me. He's a representative from Missouri who got up in front of the Congress with the opening prayer, and he prayed to, what was it, Basma, which is this Indian, this Hindu idol. And he said, in this is the famous Amen and A Women speech. But before that, which a lot of people seem to overlook, which I thought was a much bigger story, was that he basically prayed in the name of this Hindu deity, and which is obviously absolute idol worship. And that's never been done before either. So, if you are a believing person and you do think that, there's this thing in Judaism called Mida Keneged Mida, which means that it's almost like karma.
Measure for measure.
Measure for measure, literally, but in the figurative sense, it's basically karma. What goes around comes around. You mock, you as a representative of the Congress of the United States government mock, the God of Israel by including these Hindu deities in your prayer to him. Then he's going to make a mockery out of you. And it seems like that's precisely what's happening. So it's not so far-fetched to look at this and understand that there's obvious divine intervention going on here.
Yeah, but I think there is. I mean, I think there is a significance to it that America, even though it was meant to be pluralistic, with it was respect for every religion. So if a Buddhist had gotten up and made a Buddhist prayer, or a Muslim got up to make a Muslim prayer, that's one thing. But this was just an absolute mockery of prayer. It was a disrespect to any prayer. And that, I think, is a significant difference. It was anti-religion. It wasn't even a-religious. It was anti-religion. And that's where we're heading. And I think that's the real breach, the real battleground right now. And so, yeah, I think that's actually true. There's a lot of anti-religion and even a kind of perversion of religion that's taking over the country, and that's where the battle lines are drawn.
So I think before we go, let's kind of go around the horn and say what we think, how we see the day after this watershed moment playing out on the world, in the U.S., in both America and the international stage, and how it'll affect Israel, and if you think there's any sort of biblical angle, reality to this absolutely unprecedented revolution. Josh, you want to start? Eliyahu, you want to start?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, I think
You just start.
I think really it's not directly connected to Israel. Israel, we've been on our own. We've connected to America. Donald Trump, the one thing that absolutely characterized him was his unprecedented connection with Israel. So there is an Israel element to this, but I don't think it affects us. I think it's just a matter of him connecting to Israel. I wish I could see good coming out of this. I think one of the worst things that could happen is if they just try to move forward as if, oh, these people are wrong and we're not going to relate to them. We're just going to open up shop, business as usual. That will not heal this clear and obvious rift within the American society. This has to be related to. This has to be healed. It cannot be just ignored, moved on. That would be the worst possible thing. So I'm hoping there's going to be a move towards healing. I was born in the U.S. I chose to move to Israel, but I love America for deep spiritual reasons. I think it's a glowing light into the world, and it would pain me to see that light diminished.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're looking at, it is like I think it's actually bigger than 1776, because this isn't just only about the voter fraud. This is about a virus that basically came from China, shut down the US economy, devastated working class families, shut down businesses, wreaked economic havoc throughout the nation. And then on top of that, the same people who did all that damage are now stealing the only thing they have to change it, which is an election. That's without a transparent election, not only does America cease to be a democracy, but there's no way they can get their livelihoods back, because it ensures that the same people who are in power are doing that. And it kind of reminds me of, the Jews in Egypt when they were slaves, and Pharaoh just pushed them and pushed them and pushed them. They had to gather their own straw and everything. And when you push people enough, it gets and their back is against the wall. It gets to the point where it's fight or flight, and there's nowhere to flee. And so they fight. And that's, I think, what we're seeing. And I think what we're seeing is the active campaign to usurp power from the American people is now backfiring. And and I think it's going to have ripple effects throughout the world. I know here in Israel, there's a lot of people who are very angry with these lockdowns. People are just like America, and in a lot of the West, people are out of a job. Their businesses are forced to shut down. Economic devastation. People can't feed their families, and it's clearly it's not a question of whose fault it is. It's the government's fault. They decided to do all this, and when I think a lot of people will be inspired by what they're seeing in America, and in kind of the macro regarding U.S. and Israel relations. Like I said before, I mean, a lot of people in Israel are very scared about the Democrats taking over the House, the White House, and the Senate. But look at what's going on here. I think it'll be very difficult for Biden or Harris or whoever, for them to maneuver their foreign policy. They're going to have a very hard time functioning if half of the country feels that that they're living in a government that doesn't represent them.
I think it'll be difficult for them to move into the White House.
They're not going to be able to control the population like they want to, and that's going to be a serious challenge for them.
Yeah, I all I could say is that America has always been a symbol of proper governance to the world, and the way that a government works. I'm reminded of my classes that I had with the late and great Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Antonin Scalia, where he over and over again used to stress to us that the importance he used to say that every 2-bit dictator has a better constitution than the U.S. Constitution. This is coming from a U.S. Supreme Court justice. And what he meant by that is, he says, if you look at the USSR, for example, the former USSR's constitution, then you will see that the constitution there has many more rights in their Bill of Rights than we have in the U.S. Constitution. They have the right to vacation. They have the right to work. They have tons of rights that we don't include in our Bill of Rights. But everyone knows that no one really had rights in the USSR. So he says, well, what makes America great is not the U.S. Constitution, but the separation of powers, the understanding that there is a checks and balance system in which the three powers of government are able to make sure that none of them take over more than another and get too much power. And at that, I think we're seeing in not only in America, but I think we're seeing in Israel also the degradation of the government because of this lack of the separation, understanding of the separation of powers, and what each branch of government, what their authority is and what their authority is not. Now, that having been said, I think that what's happening as we're breaking news right now, as far as what's happening in the Capitol, I think this is also a lesson in history, just like it was during the Revolutionary War, just like it was during the Civil War. We've seen in history time and time again, the whole purpose of the U.S. Constitution, if you look historically back at how the United States came about when they decided to declare independence from England, was they wanted to take the authority away from the government and put it into the people. And when that has changed around, and the authority, instead of being in the hands of the people, has been taken by the government by force, you will see a backlash. And that's one of the reasons why we have a Second Amendment, to allow the people to have to continue to have the ultimate authority over their government. It's something that was, at the time of the U.S. Revolution, was something that was unprecedented in the world, to say that the people should have authority over their government. But here we see, perhaps for the first time in U.S. history, the people rising up and saying that we will not allow a government to usurp the power away from the people. Even again, whether it's right or not, that is clearly the message, and I think it's a very strong message at that.
I'm sorry to Josh. I'm just wondering. There's been a lot of in the last election. There was a lot of pushback by the Democrats against the Electoral College, and one of the functions, if I understood it correctly, and one of the functions I saw coming out from the Electoral College is that if you don't have the Electoral College, you can have the if you go simply by the numerical
popular vote.
If you go simply by the popular vote, then you have a large section of the country that feels disenfranchised, feels
it would be a joke that then all basically what you're doing is handing over the vote to all the large states, which are mostly Democratic. Like California would have a disproportional, since they have a disproportional amount of the population, they would have a disproportional amount of the vote. And we the framers of the founding fathers of the United States understood that was wrong, that we need to have a decision by all the states, not by where the concentrations of the largest populations are.
Right. And I kind of feel like what we're seeing in front of our eyes is a breakdown of the Electoral College. What happens when the Electoral College does not fully do what it's intended to do? That what we're seeing here is a large portion of the population feeling disenfranchised. And that's what, when democracy breaks down, is when people feel like they're not part of the process anymore.
I'm not sure why.
That they're not represented. Sure why. That's what that was what 1776 was about.
Exactly.
Taxation without representation.
Exactly.
No point of it. You can't call it a democracy if you're not being represented.
And even if these people,
terrible feeling.
Even if you convince these people that their votes were counted, which seriously is in doubt, even if you convince them that their votes were counted, they do not feel represented. They do not feel like they're part of the process. That feeling is so strong that they're willing to leave their homes and protest, and some even to get violent, because they feel that they are not part of the process. They're not being represented.
Ironic.
That's a breakdown of the system.
Plate of every resident of Washington, D.C. I don't know if you're aware of this, but every license plate in Washington, D.C. says taxation without representation, because Washington, D.C. doesn't have their representatives in the Congress. So therefore, they feel that they're being taxed without representation. It's actually on the license plate of every resident of the Capitol.
Yeah, and yeah, that's
well, that's going to
very
change real
interesting.
soon when Biden breaks the filibuster and when he packs the court.
If he gets in, the country will be changed. They're already talking. AOC is already tweeting how everything is going to change. They're going to pack the courts. That's clear. They're going to be trying to get rid of the Electoral College. It's understood that this is a make it or break it moment, where if the Republicans fail at this, and this is the frustration that people feel. They feel that if they don't stop it right now, then there's no way of stopping it in the future.
And they're right. They're just, and we saw it coming. That's why when Biden was running, he didn't have to state his platform. And if he had stated it, people ignored it. And he could go back and forth, say one thing one day and one thing the next. There was no platform, but there was a platform. The platform was the agenda. The agenda we knew was to break the filibuster, to total control, including packing the courts, including the filibuster, including whatever they had in mind. We said Kamala Harris, I remember when in the primaries, the Democratic primaries, they were talking about gun control. And Joe Biden, who, whatever he is, he's old school. And he said, you can't just, it's the Second Amendment. You can't just change it. And Kamala Harris turned around with her rather demonic laugh and said, oh, just watch me. Okay, I've got a pen. I've got a phone. It's horrifying. If they get in, when they get in, if they get in, God forbid, there is just an agenda so big that it's never been spoken about. Warnock was elected, Raphael Warnock. He said explicitly that he was a Marxist. Well, he didn't. He said he praised Marxism and Marxists, and he praised Fidel Castro. He said that the Nation of Islam should be more of an example for the Christian church. So the agenda is really clear. Joe Biden, the only thing that they could pin on him was that he was going to outlaw fossil fuels in 50 years. People do not understand what that means. One of the things in Israel, we're very connected with the exchange rate with the American dollar. My wife and I are very aware of the fact that the dollar is nosediving. It did not do that when Trump was elected. America is in for a very difficult time. God willing, I'm wrong. God willing, in a year or two, people are going to say, oh, Eliyahu, you remember you said this? You were so wrong. God willing. But this is the unfortunate agenda that I see laid out in front of us.
Okay.
Indeed.
I think that's a good place to. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to encourage everybody. We're gonna wrap it up now, but in 1 hour's time, I want you to all come back. We're going to have a amazing Rabbi Mendel Kessen. He's going to come on the line and he is going to tell us the prophetic biblical perspective of current events and what we're seeing. I'm sure that he will have amazing things to say, considering the things that we've just witnessed in the past hour.
God willing.
Okay.
Thank you for coming.
America.
We're praying for you from Israel. We're praying with all our hearts for the good of our spiritual brethren in America. May you all be blessed. Bless us. We'll bless you in return. That's the way it works.
Prayers from Jerusalem.